What's up guys, the Strong Boys 19 here. This is going to be the next album review into the Korn discography, and I'm going to be reviewing the band's second album entitled Life is Peachy. So Life is Peachy was released October 15th, 1996, and this was recorded once again at Indigo Ranch Studios in Malibu, California, with Ross Robinson producing this album for the second time for the band's discography, and this is the follow-up to the very acclaimed debut self-titled album. Now, this album is really the deliverance and continuation where the darkness, the very atmospherically brooding and heavy sounds of the material that the debut album was, and Korn decides to deliver into that once again with this record. And this album, out of all of the albums in the discography of Korn, is my main favourite. This has been my favourite Korn album, and it's not just because of the heaviness. I think that Life is Peachy is my favourite because it has a really intensifying and chaotic, menacing, violent matter that follows the debut massively. And this coming Friday, the album will be celebrating its 25th anniversary. The album really is, out of all of the Korn albums, with me, the band's most aggressive and heaviest record to date. And I'll have to say that it's very underrated and one of my favourite albums of all time. I think that Life is Peachy is a record where it follows the debut efficiently. And I know that some other Korn fans would still pick the debut over this, or maybe pick Follow the Leader over this album. But I think that Life is Peachy deserves a lot more attention. The first track is Twist. The first opening song is 49 minutes, and you hear a lot of these very frenetic, manic, staccato rapping improvisation parts from Jonathan Davis, and the music to it is just as chaotic for a brief 49 seconds to open things up. And that is when I think the darkness really starts to continue on after the track. We go into the next track of Chi, and I absolutely think this is one of the beginnings where they go into this incredibly deep mark of musicality and also musicianship. And the track Chi, lyrics-wise, deal onto the abused addictions onto drugs and alcohol, and the title was named after Cheng, and Cheng liked the music genre of reggae, so it had to be taken into Cheng's head for the song Chi, and it was actually a reggae song. Incredibly powerful, especially on these grunty, aggressive guitar chords into the chorus, and you hear one of the other blazing screams from Jonathan into this track, and you hear a lot more of that intensity later on onto this album. One of the other incredible tracks is on the track Swallow, and I think that Swallow is a very nerve-wracking number. This is just a very basic song with lyricisms deal onto the paranoia expression about inducing yourself to drugs, and this vivid imagery of that presence with so much punch. Swallow, one of the other underrated gems of this album, Good God, and Good God is a brutal song, and Jonathan says that it was about the guy that he knew in school, and he thought that he was his friend, but it just changed into something incredibly wrong, and that he was basically a liar to him, once a friend, then using him so badly. But I think that this pressure and brutality of a song of Good God marks into another incredible vocal performance from Davis, and these disturbing nature of these guitar chords. And I think that some of Fieldy's bass lines on a song like this is such a rhythmic and versatile part of the track. Porno Creep, the other instrumental, is a bit of a weird one, to be honest, because I think that this type of song is like an improvisational piece, like Twist, but there's something pretty funky about it. And this is another one where you hear one of Silvera's very best drumming, just such a tasteful part of arrangements with his beats, and these various guitar effects all over. It's one of the other mellow, but still one of these chilling sounds of instrumentation. And speaking of a song that is chilling, there's a song called Mr. Rogers. And Mr. Rogers, Jonathan Davis met as that he told him to be polite, and yet again, involving a lot of abused behaviours from other people, Mr. Rogers did eventually get him picked on, and Davis was then used. Jonathan was really thinking about people who they take advantage behind his back, and just like with other tracks involving Good God and Chi, it's just as a really visceral. This is a very atmospheric one at that. I think the most over-the-top track with a lot of the lyricism, with profanity, tons of multiple swearing, is on the song Cunt. So this is lyrically about a lot of various women who treated Davis like shit, and this was pretty controversial that at the time of this album's release, the track's title had to be censored with multiple various text signs and logos. Adidas, the other single on the album, is an acronym for All Day I Dream About Sex. So I think that this track of All Day I Dream About Sex is pretty much a very controversial number, because it was about having a mad obsession to sex and fantasizing it. You know, it's pretty much like a pornographic type of vein into lyrics. And I'm just looking through this point into the track, that according to some of the notes, that when Brian Head Welch rejoined Korn in 2013, he requested the band to not play the song ever again, because there was an incident where Head saw his daughter, who was 5 at the time, reciting the lyrics into this track, and he was going through the Christianity part after he left the band before he rejoined. And I may quote from Head, "She was 5 years old and I'm sitting there watching her sing All Day I Dream About Sex. That's not right. I do not care if she didn't know what she was singing. It still freaked me out. It's just not right for her to see her dad strung out on drugs, as he was going through drug addiction at that point. And it's not right for her to sing that song. It's like I was stealing her childhood or something." But nonetheless, Adidas is another instantly recognizable song for the band, and I really think that this, despite its controversial style of lyrics, this is something pretty funky onto the bass lines and drumming patterns, and these distorting, howling chords on the chorus really sets the tone into that continuation of Korn to be delivering another hook. I think that a lot of the tracks on Life is Peachy do deliver so much of these hooks, all into these various passages. Wicked, which does feature Chino Moreno from Deftones, which is an Ice Cube cover. And I can say that out of all of the songs on here, this personally would be my least favourite. But I think that Chino Moreno, as a vocalist, for me being very talented and gifted, especially for the attention that Deftones was really getting through the eras of Adrenaline to Around the Fur, I think his vocal performance in this rapping vocal style, he did very well. And as well with that staccato syncopation of the chorus section with Davis's signature sound. It's a pretty unusual cover, but I always don't really mind this particular track. And I think that the other track, the 1 minute brief cover of Low Rider, which was originally done by War, you hear Head doing these vocals, and I just can't help but to think this was absolutely hilarious. And if you have seen the Who Then Now documentary, I believe it was at Head's birthday at that time that he was recording his vocals during that cover, and it cracked me up every time I listened to this. Other tracks that I think were just really rhythmic and just delivering so much action and adrenaline, with tracks like Ass Itch, a fantastic track, the finale of the song Kill You. Kill You is pretty much on the very alike similarity on its nature from Daddy. Kill You lyrically addresses about Davis's ex-stepmother, and it was really a disgusted and uncompromising time for Jonathan, because she was a relative that Davis knew and he despised her so bad. And it's just another bravery mark of vocal performance. You can really once again feel that anguish, pain through the way Davis was singing through these lyrics. It's such like, again, a violent and abysmal fuck you kind of aggression for Jonathan. I really do feel that Davis is always one of these vocalists that he is absolutely a distinctive vocalist for delivering an actual feel and expressive part of metal music. And with the instrumentation, Kill You is at some points really percussive, and it's incredibly intense. I would say that it's like Daddy in a way, but obviously with a different relative. But I think this is just as an outstanding and an amazing performance for the entirety of the band and Jonathan as a vocalist. There are various hip-hop influences surrounding this album, as with Head and Monkey still listens to Mr. Bungle, but listening to others involving Sepultura, to Rage Against the Machine, and early Outkast. So there is a bit of that variety into this album, but I think the variety really sparkles in until the next album of Follow the Leader, which I obviously will get to. And I'll have to say that these influences were really marking something very, very precisely. And I really like that Korn are finding many adventurous ways with the band's musical arrangements and ability to make something like still delivering the intensity and heaviness of their music, but to find many other different things along the way. The album's cover art is something really similar to the design from the first album, and I think that this album's cover art is one of my favorites of all time. You see this little boy suiting up, doing his tie, and then you see a bigger, larger, darker shadow of himself. And the photography for this album cover was also done by Steven Stickler, who, as I said from the debut album review, he did the photography for the debut as well. The production done by Ross Robinson is pretty much like an alike way of tonality and sound along with the debut, but it's really crisp, it's menacing, and it has a separate way of the dramatic, dynamic, and a wonderful sound. The drums on this album sounded attacking. Head and Monkey's guitars, Fieldy's bass, big on this album. You see and hear these thick notes that are really, there in the mixing point, and Jonathan's vocals were just absolutely amazing once again for this album. Life is Peachy, to me, is another classic album from Korn, and I am also curious to dive into your comments what you really think about this album. Do you think this is a very strong second album from the band? Do you think that it's maybe as a classic album, or maybe a better album, or one of the best in the band's discography? Overall, with this album rating for this album, it's, to me, another classic rating. It's a 10 out of 10. This really stays with me as my favourite Korn album for a lot of reasons, and I absolutely do adore this album as much as the debut record out of all of the band's discography. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll keep you guys posted for more videos in the near future.